have to do a little piece of business here because it shows me as Malou, and
I
I have
know. Isn't that cool?
absolutely no idea. I mean, that's my kind of avatar, I guess, or whatever on social media, but why did it do
And
that?
I'll
It's
skip to you. Skip to Malou.
Well,
skip
actually,
to Baloo.
it's a totally different Malou. It's if
Well,
you're
that's the first time
familiar.
I've heard that pun, though. That's good. Because Carmen is really into Baloo from Tintin.
Yes.
Ah, I see.
And
I've never thought of Skip to My Lou.
yeah, no, it's a good one. So I guess what it is, I mean, I do not. Well, yes, you
I'm
would
going to
have.
rename you.
You
I'm going to rename you.
can you? I'm trying to. It's like
There you go.
I'm. Oh, thank you. I'm on.
Someone else
Yeah.
might have, some host might have named you.
No, I'm on my new desktop, and it
Oh, yeah, your new
it
machine.
is. I don't understand how this happens because I haven't been Malou on Zoom in years, and this laptop came out of the box. This desktop came out of a box 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, Zoom.
So how would it go find that?
There's all sorts of trickery that Zoom does.
It's very, very strange. And it's like,
Well,
hi Eric, I'm Carmen.
Hey, Carmen.
I found the Atom conversation. It just had not had a chance to load up into the cloud before I
yeah,
had to leave.
that happens. I've seen that, but it's never lost. It's always
Yeah.
haunting your computer.
But
Yeah.
sadly, at least I think sadly, it recorded in the one person at a time mode.
Oh,
Which I
yeah.
mean, that's happened once before. Again, I blame it all on trying to get a brand new computer going. Looking at my ceiling here.
Is everything okay with your ceiling?
I think so. Yes. I mean, it's
My ceiling's
good.
looking pretty good. I am sitting in an unusual place. This is the guest bedroom. I
Uh-huh.
decided I needed to mix it up. It's very boring. It looks like just a blank wall, and it is.
Well, I'm sitting at my as you know, I consider amiably cluttered, or amiably is not quite the right word, but
It's friendly.
it's cluttered in a friendly way.
Yeah. Yeah. Your basement land.
My
Eric, where are
basement.
you? I see you in this place every time where you are right now. But where in
Yes.
your house is that? Is that like your office?
This is my office, but also since my daughter got back from Chile, it's where one of us sleeps each night.
You rotate?
We rotate, yeah.
Is
That's
this
the
part
only
of
way.
why you're thinking of moving?
It's part of it. Yeah, it's not easy to just build an addition to your house in California, so or cheap. So we're just rotating until she's ready to go to college, and then somebody will slide right into her room permanently. And right now, it's the massage room as well.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
nice. Because your wife is a massage therapist, right?
No, it was her birthday yesterday though, so the kids wanted to do a group massage,
Oh, how
which
nice. Oh my gosh, I wish I had more than one child, A, and B, that child was interested in that.
yeah, I mean it's probably conceptually relaxing
Yeah, bring my camera
to get a
down
group massage from
just.
children.
Oh no, no, no.
You think
Hold
it's
on a second.
conceptually relaxing? Yeah, because like they're
Conceptually, yeah.
distracted and they're not actually massage therapists.
I
Why
said,
did I think your wife was a massage therapist? Because we should start sometime soon. But
Sure.
did 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 your wife used to run that
Yeah,
one
she was one of the
day
managing
spa?
directors at Harbin Hot Springs.
Yeah, that's right.
And we were both actually licensed massage therapists from the Harbin School up here.
Yeah.
We both decided to get our licenses just to be able to give better massages. So,
So is that how you would introduce yourself, Eric, as a licensed
yes,
massage therapist?
massage therapist with a background in cognitive psychology and intelligence. Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, how would you introduce yourself? Carmen and I tend to just get really casual really quickly, but we always try to remind ourselves to introduce people, but it's better if you introduce yourself because I know you through TILT, the Institute for Love and Time, which will soon have a name change.
Oh, really?
Yes. Can we say what that is, Eric?
I think this is a good time to go ahead and say what it is.
Yeah, you want to say it? It's very exciting.
Sure. Yeah, so yeah, in order to broaden to a more mainstream audience and to meet people where they are, and to reflect our ongoing pivot towards in real life events and tools, we are changing our name to Applied Love Labs. That nails the love part, and nails the experimental part, it nails the development part, and nails the application in the real world part. So,
And the acronym rocks.
Yeah.
right. So we can say things like love for all, which is mostly not confusing email. So we've been working with 38 studios, or Studio 38, on the rebrand, and it should be going live in about 3 weeks.
Yeah, so Eric is the executive director at TILT, soon to be all Applied Love Labs, and he's rocking it. So that's how I know Eric. Not really. I know Eric actually from the year was 2008, I believe, when I met Eric. And I was a postdoc and
I was
Eric
just going to say you were postdocs somewhere together.
Yeah, Eric was a graduate student finishing up graduate school, right, Eric?
Yes.
Yeah, in a lab in Satoru Suzuki's lab at Northwestern University. And we, but Eric, actually, I would love it if you're open to talking about what we first thought of each other. Like, what did you first think of me? And I'm going to tell you what I first thought of you. But
It's a good question. I was very much in a space where the universe was just dropping exactly what I needed on me at every moment. And so I didn't think all that much about you showing up because it made so much sense. Like I had just finished a psychology of consciousness course with Satoru, who, um, in addition to being one of the like brute force smartest people I've ever met, like it was also very open and very strong scientifically. Like, don't shut something down unless you've got a reason to shut it down. So, um, we started talking about, the random number generator research by Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory, and that sort of stuff, and like the Gonsfeld experiments. And then Julia showed up. I believe your advisor was in the audiology department, and I was like, that's really neat because we're interested in like sub-threshold um, audio perception and that sort of. So anyway, my impression was that it made a lot of sense for you to be there at that time, and I was excited to have you there when we were working on the random number generator stuff.
so my impression was I was so delighted. Yeah, I guess similar impression, but I was so delighted that there was someone who I could tell. I mean, I knew Satoru. The reason why I was in the lab is because Satoru was really smart and he considered this stuff not to be insane. Um, so that's why I was there. But that there was another person kind of a little bit more like me than Satoru, in the sense that we were both interested in the psychology of everything.
Yeah.
And this was one of the everythings. And also, the other thing I remember is just passing you, like not talking to you for weeks at a time, because we were both in our own worlds doing our own things, but then periodically passing you at the gym and being like, well, what do you think of this and this? And then we would
Oh
go
yeah.
on. It,
Right.
it felt like we would have these juicy conversations at the gym about, well, what about that? And what about this? And what would it take for people to understand that this is real? And we both realized early on that the problem of understanding extraordinary human capacities is largely one of helping people realize that it doesn't have to be scary.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I like when people talk about extrasensory or supernatural and stuff like that, like I'm in favor of abolishing all of that. And if it's real, then it's natural.
Yeah,
If it
it's
exists in
not
the natural world, then
supernatural.
it's natural. Yeah.
Yeah,
But also we have like very strong criteria for determining like, is this real? So, you know,
yeah, yeah. And we both have very strong criteria. I believe that some of those criteria have been met by certain capacities, and I think you are less in that camp. Is that true?
no, I think some of them have been met. Yeah. as
Yeah.
well. I'm also interested so I've seen the two of you popping up on my LinkedIn feed with podcasts, and we were just talking about pandas this morning, actually, because there's a glycerin suppository that its little logo mascot is a panda bear.
Oh,
So my
That's good to
son
know.
does not like panda bears, but I do like panda bears. So I'm curious about how the two of you met, where pandas playing cello comes from, and all that stuff. So,
I'm distracted by your son's that situation. We might have to cut that.
dislike of pandas. Yes.
We might have to cut that part out
Oh,
because it will lead people in the another direction. But yeah, Carmen, yeah, how would you
well,
how
I was introduced to Gloria by a mutual.
you mean Julia?
Yeah, sorry, I was introduced to Julia by a mutual acquaintance, obviously, in 2020 at the start of the pandemic, and she was interested in the national security intelligence community and how could she meet people and perhaps, offer up her knowledge to them. And the person who introduced us already knew that I was, for intelligence community people, more tolerant of edgy stuff than the average. So we talked over, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. Um, and Julia has always wanted me to write a book, and I tell her I'm too lazy and I'm done with writing books. And then at some point I said, but let's try doing like a podcast YouTube channel on it, and I said, and we could just do it about things that are interesting to us, just have a conversation about things that are interesting to us. And, because of our totally different backgrounds, we have a huge Venn diagram thing,
yeah.
and Julia says, well, that would be fun because two women talking about serious topics is as unusual as pandas playing cello. And I went,
I see.
oh, that's the name, right then and there. And we don't have merch, but I got a friend of mine to draw us kind of rock and roll pandas, basically.
Very cool.
Think of them as, and and that's it. And I've really enjoyed it. I was going through a list of people earlier this year, from my Rolodex, and I realized it's kind of like inexhaustible.
It is.
There's just many, many, many people that I could approach.
I have been wanting to approach Eric a lot for the last year. I think I've been nagging Eric because he's one of the most interesting thinkers I know. And Eric, by the way, you introduced yourself as a background in cognitive science, but you also lead two organizations. And do you want to say that here? Because you were invited
Sure.
to.
Sure. Yeah. In addition to the Institute for Love and Time, which is becoming Applied Love Labs, I'm the CEO of Tangible IQ, and that is basically applying business intelligence and strategy to, actionable changes in businesses. And I end up getting really neat clients if they get it. Um, and if they don't get it, then I don't get them as clients. So like it's all pretty much word of mouth. But what does your regulatory activist reputational landscape look like? How can you either flex yourself to meet that, or how can you engage in your environment to shape your landscape? So that came out of the intelligence and strategy work that I did with a group of folks: Daniel Diermeyer, Paul Delgallo, Matthew Trepanier, Carolyn Thibodeau. We had started an intelligence firm right when I got out of graduate school. I actually crossed the sidewalk to the business school after I'd defended my dissertation, and just started asking around if anybody was interested in starting a business and if they needed a psychologist. And I was lucky enough to have fallen in with these folks. So
Now, how are you using the word intelligence here? What does it mean?
yeah, it's tricky because if you say business intelligence, it means what does your KPIs dashboard look like and stuff like that. We were using it in the way that David Barron from Stanford uses it as beyond market or non-market intelligence. So what is going on in your business landscape beyond suppliers, competitors, your operations, and like so this is media, this is reputational, and for the most part, it's open source, which we blend with proprietary intelligence from the client and sort of pivot that against what their aspirations are.
And your background, I think you did do some intelligence work as a contractor with government, right?
We
Is that
did
where this
some
comes
we did
from?
some government work, yeah. It's not my favorite, to be honest. Aside from my developing moral crisis about working with governments, it was also I like to know what's going on. I don't like to be looking through a straw. I like to know if there's an enemy, who the enemy is and why. If there's if there's a strategy, why are we executing on this strategy? And I like to I need to have that kind of context because I'm a pattern recognizer type. So I think sometimes signals intelligence just stays at the signals level, and then everybody ignores it, and then policymakers just like read whatever their preferred news source is of the day rather than diving into actual intelligence work. So we stayed mostly away from government, but we did some stuff with Canada, we did some stuff with state governments and that sort of thing. So.
And when when you talk about your evolving, did you use the word distrust or crisis? What was the
Distaste. I think he said distaste.
Yeah.
I
Were
probably said all of those.
Yeah.
And so are you open to talking about that? Like, how does that roll inside of you? How did that roll?
Sure. So the more I learned about psychology, the more I saw it dovetail with political science when we talked about the importance of things like consent of the governed, whether violence is a legitimate tool to claim authority. What happens to people when they're not aligned in a system? What happens to people when you surveil them if they're not aligned in a system? So I think there's a pretty strong utilitarian case with the psychology of it against non-consensual nation states. So I think that case is basically unless you have full alignment, you have to surveil people, which decreases their intrinsic motivation, which either turns them against the group that they're supposed to be in, which that's pretty much what we have right now, where it's like half the people who are like, not my president, and then they lower their hand when they've got the ring of power, and then the other group says, not my president. That can't possibly work. The other piece is that, and I think Germany and Italy and to some extent the United States figured this out uh, last century was that public compliance is not the same as private acceptance. And the more you coerce people into publicly complying, the more they're either going to shut down or brain drain and leave for somewhere else. And these are the most important people to have in your society because they're able to anticipate changes, to respond very quickly to changes in your environment. And if you lose them, then your bundle of sticks just kind of falls apart.
So,
Because oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm just curious why you tripled the US with Germany and Italy. I was thinking paired, but there's three. So, what's the word? But you associated the US with Germany and Italy. And I imagine that you're thinking of Germany and Italy during fascism.
Yes.
And so I'm curious why you put the US with them. Like you could argue you could put Japan in that group. You could certainly
Yeah.
put the Soviet Union, and for sure you can put China in that group. So why are you focusing on that?
Sure. Well, I qualified it as to some extent the
I know
U.S.
you did. I heard it, but still.
Yeah. So I would say any nation state from the 1800 on has been nationalist to some extent. And I mean, that came out of France, where it's like, okay, in order to rally up people for the draft, we have to have them basically fall in love with this myth of the symbolic nation state. And that's, I see it as a cult or a religion that provides people with meaning, and they basically trade a lot of things off to get that meaning. The reason why I would lump the United States into that is, in a reaction to some of the Asian and European fascist movements, the United States did do things like involuntarily incarcerate individuals of Japanese internment camps and that sort of thing. Um, FDR, banned books and banned opposition media. So they did some of those things. What was really missing was that central myth that everybody adopted because there was such a tradition of individual liberty. And I think we saw something similar in Italy where they didn't go quite as far as Germany because their central myth was around family, and that was
Yeah.
basically their structure. Once you start having families report one another to the secret police and stuff like that, I would say that's about as full of a conversion as you can make. But I would put it on a spectrum of anytime you're uh, subjugating individuals to this meaning structure and they're not allowed to attain meaning outside of this meaning structure. I would say that's in the same camp.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with everything you said, other than the idea that the US deserves a special call out, because there are just so many countries that fall into that category. The UK didn't hesitate in doing things. Uh, there's a good example of a movie which I continue to recommend called Nivo in Africa, nowhere. Nivo, it's German. And it's a story of a Jewish family that flees Germany and goes to Kenya for safety before
Yeah.
World War II. And then the dad, once the war is declared, ends up in a camp because they're taking all the German nationals and for security reasons, coercing them, forcing them to live in a camp. So, so there's just, and of course, Spain and Franco was uh, another guy
Absolutely.
who
Yeah.
behaved very poorly for his people. But so other than that, I mean, I agree completely with what you're saying, because as I've said on the show many times, or on this podcast, it's not quite a show, my favorite political philosophy is anarchism. And so I very much understand how by creating these nation state concepts and then institutions of power, a lot of bad things happen.
Yeah.
Institutions of control.
Yes, well, yeah,
I think we confuse power. I think power is confusing because there
well,
can be
that's
like
not what the anarchist believes. The anarchist believes there is no good, that it's the very creation of an institution of power that begins to create the problem, because once that institution is created, and we each have our view of who the good guys who could be in power are, as opposed to the bad guys who could be in power. But the anarchist would say, oh, okay, you're confusing the issue. The problem is that there is an institution of power. And once you
Yeah.
create it, inevitably people compete to control it. And we delude ourselves to think that.
I
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
understand the argument. It's just that the word power
yeah,
is misused, I think. If anarchists believe that that's the cause. So in other words, most of the institutions of power that you're talking about are really about institutions of control. In other words, there's like power with and there's power
yeah.
over. And there are institutions of power over, which I don't consider that real power. I want to take back the word power.
Yeah,
I
that's
feel like
fair.
power comes with power. True power is about love. It's about power with. It's not about control or power over. And so I just
I think
that word.
that's part
I,
of the evolution of anarchism as well, where there's a rift right now in the anarchist movement, basically between people who say that there's no legitimate hierarchical power structure, because it's sort of the tradition of Tolkien and Tolstoy and to some extent Karl Popper, or just like it's about the structures. I'm actually more on what I would consider the voluntarist side, where as long like I think that involuntary servitude is always wrong, but voluntary servitude is the ultimate expression of the self, giving yourself over. So you think about like a knight's oath,
Hmm.
or you bring a child into the world, or those sorts of things. So I like to leave it open to. I've got no problem with hierarchical power structures as long as everyone has opted into that group and has opted into the mechanisms of consensus. And that's a big, big decision.
That's a big
Uh,
if too.
right. It's a big
Yeah.
decision. So
Yeah.
I
It's
think it.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Now, it's just the thought that came to mind is, oh, what a tangled web we weave when we created technologies that allowed us to live in scales, as in sizes of communities that were voluntary organization, just apparently exceeded the emotional and psychological capacities of a
Yeah.
lot of people. And so, I like the idea of I I I I'm aspirational about anarchy, but practical, very practical about its limitations. And
Yeah.
scale is like a killer.
Scale, I think scale can be when we talk about are you able to compete with an involuntary nation state, which is basically very good at organizing violence. Because like when I think about okay, how long has nationalism been around? Like 200 years, maybe. If you look back to ancient Ireland. They had the Brehon Law and the Tuat system, which was basically no central government. It was all run by kind of like what Belgium did for several years. It was run by civil servants who were just
Right.
specialists in the law, and it was largely reputation based, and it worked for 500 BC to 1500, and for 2,000 years, maybe more, right? So like and they didn't have sort of connection technologies and rapid deployment technologies and stuff like that. So I think we're reaching this point where we could do some experiments like what you're talking about, which is small scale, and then you just grow it until you find the breaking point, and then that's when you learn. That's when you learn where it breaks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to derail the conversation into one of my favorite areas, but I will say that about 20 years ago, yeah, 20 years ago, I was involved with an issue. Kind of the last major thing I did at CIA was to try to wake up the CIA to how the world was changing. That sounds grand, but that really was what I was trying to do.
Somebody's got to do it.
And I had a group, a small group, and we were trying. And so we worked with a contractor to create like a presentation about how different the world was going to be. And I think we made these presentations maybe in 2007 and 2008. And we pretty much, I think, I mean, we didn't capture all the changes, but the ones that we mentioned were accurate. We missed a lot of them, but I don't think we got any of them wrong. And I remember at the time saying, okay, so we're very smug, we meaning the West, we're very smug because communism failed. And communism failed because it just, 5-year central plans just did not end up being a very
Right.
good way to organize economies. But they were using old technology. And so I would just annoy the heck out of people but by saying, well, now, if you tried to centrally plan economy with, I mean, just the technologies we had in 2008, I wonder if it wouldn't actually work a lot better. And, evil, bad person that I was saying this. And of course, now with AI, uh, that, my point is even more possible, I guess.
Not just economies, but whole cultures with
Yeah,
AI.
which I'm not, I don't, I mean,
It doesn't feel good to me either.
it doesn't feel great, but China is definitely in that direction. Hell bent for leather, I think. But they have the advantage, I think they have the advantage of having naturally a more communally oriented
And more homogeneous.
social
Vision.
value
Yeah.
system. There's a lot there, Eric, so I'm going to stop talking.
I would try it because like when people say that communism, I would describe myself basically as a libertarian communist. I believe that groups work better than individuals in the most case for achieving shared goals. And I believe it only works if it's voluntary at the individual level. And we see all over the place collectivist structures like corporations and families, country clubs and everything. Those work just fine, right? They probably work
Exactly.
better than if everybody had a vote. So I think you're right. The question is scale, and we don't know what the hard limits are on voluntary systems. We know that China is able to do it with massive coercion, but we don't know what the hard limits are. And if you look at something like there's a game called Star Citizen that has raised $1 billion voluntarily to build this universe, and the money's come from its users. Like, if you can raise $1 billion to build a virtual universe, then you could raise $1 billion to build a town. If you can raise $1 billion to build a town, you could probably raise $1 trillion to build a city state or something like that. So I'd love to see city states, and I think we are kind of seeing that, where like you've got Sacramento becoming sort of its own thing. Um,
Are
I'd
you
love
Wait,
to see
can you
the
say
rise of
are
cities.
you in Sacramento?
No,
Oh,
no,
I have a
I'm
very, very good friend who lives in Sacramento. Yeah.
wait, tell me more about Sacramento becoming its own thing. I don't know about that. I've been gone from California too long.
sure. It's like so how much can you bring into the city state and its immediately surrounding areas? So can you make yourself food self-sufficient? Can you make yourself 20% food self-sufficient? Can you make yourself 80% food self-sufficient? Can you make sure that people believe that the community is a police force, that the police force is a community-based police force? It's there to serve them rather than to act as overseers on a plantation. Those sorts of things, you see going on. Like, I don't like California's state government, but I do really like when I see city states try to solve the problem of scale. And I think you can do it because, especially in a place like San Francisco, you do have natural boundaries, so you can control a little bit for um, external inputs. Like when people test out UBI, they're not controlling for external inputs and outputs, so the results you can't really trust, right? Like, but I think city states can do it.
Wow. And so did you mean Sacramento or San Francisco when you were talking about that?
Both.
Both are
Uh,
doing that kind of
I
thing?
think Sacramento is doing a better job of it because
I
San
believe
Francisco, I
that. San
think people
Francisco's,
still, yeah, they still look to the government to say solve our problems.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, in Sacramento, there's more of a
So,
feeling
Eric,
of we the people.
are you
Yeah.
familiar with the book by James C. Scott, Two Cheers for Anarchism?
No.
James C. Scott is emeritus, I think he's still with us, professor of, I think both, he's a PhD both in anthropology and political science. And he wrote a really easy to read book, Two Cheers for Anarchism. Basically goes, I studied political systems all around the world. And I know I'm not supposed to say this, but anarchy is really it's always been secretly my love. So now at the end of my career, let me tell you why. And he has, when you were talking about how country clubs can self-organize, that's the kind of argument that he makes,
Yeah.
very practical, very, in my way of thinking, very persuasive. But the best line in that book, and this will now switch us perhaps to another topic, but the line that he almost threw away, almost a throwaway line, he goes, "What is charisma?" And he said, people keep trying to figure out what we mean by that. And he said that the basic quality of a charismatic person is that they are a very good listener. So charismatic, he was talking about politicians, are able to parrot back what their supporters want to hear. And this gets us to the, did Trump create MAGA or did MAGA create
Right.
Trump conundrum? But anyway, highly recommend the book.
That's
We should
I love to
link to
hear.
it on the notes for this
Cool.
Sure.
Two
episode.
cheers for
2 cheers
anarchism.
for anarchism.
Well, the
That's
other one is the book that Eric got me a couple months ago, just as a little gift at the end of the year,
yeah,
which was
yeah.
the Velvet Monkey Wrench Gang book.
The
What was it
Velvet
called? The Velvet
Monk.
Monkey Wrench?
The Velvet Monkey Wrench by John Muir, not the
Not
naturalist, but
not the
the
naturalist John Muir.
engineer. Uh, yeah, I think I like that book. Well, I like the writing of that book because it's very engaging,
It's
and I
funny.
love the illustrations. It's the same guy who did the Complete Idiot's Guide to Repairing Your Volkswagen. And he basically applies that sort of systems engineering approach to how do you rebuild a society? Um,
I mean, I
I
don't
think
agree with most of what he says,
no,
but I
me either. Me
really
either. I think the reason I like that book so much is it's a good contrast to David Friedman's book, The Machinery of Freedom, which is basically what happens if you take the same systems approach, but make sure that the psychological incentives are aligned. And you give up a lot of the control, and then you just think about aligning psychological incentives. So, he had the idea, I think it was in the 70s, of how come taxi cab companies are still a thing? People own cars, and 90% of the time they're not doing anything with their cars. So basically, he's like, there's this market for somebody to come in and, Uber and Waze and Lyft and everything. I
lived.
live out in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere, so they all popped up. And then he says, could you do that with rights enforcement? Could you do that with the legal system? And a lot of his stuff has come true, whereas some of the really interesting pie in the sky ideas haven't come true because they're talking about shoulds rather than is. So,
Yes, it's too much of an engineering statement. Like, oh, we should create a whole new culture and it works this way. And it's like, ha 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 ha.
but what I do like, here's a pattern I've been seeing is when people talk about anarchists, I think they still think about a 20-year-old listening to punk rock, throwing pipe bombs, but it's really, I think people who've been down every other path and hit a hard obstacle and reset, I'll try another path. And then what they end up at is some form of anarchism. And I think that should be the new face. I think it should be basically the face of wisdom is the face of anarchism rather than rebellion. So,
How would you define anarchism, both of you? I have my own definition. How would you do it?
You're the guest, Eric.
sure. I would say that uh, anarchism is basically you can have rules but no rulers.
Mm.
Uh, that's the
Mm.
way I like to have it distilled.
Yeah.
Then I'm an anarchist.
Anarchism is self-organizing, is the kind of belief in community groups of people self-organizing for the common good. And they manage this without needing to put people in power permanently or create permanent institutions of power.
Okay, can I share my screen of this
Sure.
slide deck? I just gave this talk yesterday, Levels of Power, which is why I was talking about power over power with.
Yeah.
It seems to me power that what you're talking about as anarchism is this power through community where the ego is actually a temporary pattern in a relational field. This is the way Notebook LM describes it, which is based on our conversation, which I think is really neat. So it's this idea that the ego, sort of the center of power at any particular moment, fluctuates according to the attunement in these relationships and what people are doing. So if there's a big project that some people are really passionate about to, I don't know, heal this person over here, then the involvement is everyone who can help with that. And then that shifts to something else. And maybe you're involved and maybe you're not involved. But the power sort of is this distributed sea, you know? I don't know. What do
It
you think?
looks like the American West land rights scheme.
Yes, yes.
Right?
I often point to that with people when I have a conversation. People go, well, where has anarchy ever really happened? And I go, well, American
formation.
West, I
Yeah.
think, at least as it started out, the frontiers,
I mean, it's basically squatters' rights.
the people got there before the institutions of power got there, and then they had to figure out how to do things.
Yeah, and they had there's a really great book.
But it didn't work out so well for the Native Americans who were there. So
Well,
they were not included in that.
that's the really interesting thing. So there's a book called The Not So Wild Wild West. It's by a couple of
I gotta find.
Stanford
Yeah.
economists, I believe.
Yeah.
And they make a case for institutional entrepreneurs who had peaceful trade relations with the native populations, and peaceful, mostly peaceful land rights and grazing rights and that sort of thing. And they were hyper regional. They were all about aligning incentives. And then you didn't see real violence towards the Native Americans until the army showed up.
Yeah,
And
until
what
the
happened
power
there is that
institution came in. Yes.
exactly, and it lowered the cost of violence for the settlers, who instead of coming up with mutually beneficial schemes, said, "Well, what if we just kill you?"
So
Uh,
it's a higher cost to negotiate and do diplomacy and to engage in that situation when there's this other option. And then if there's no other option, then you don't have to worry about it. Is there a way to make the cost of using violence, given that we know practically it's an option,
yeah,
high enough that negotiation and diplomacy still feels like lower cost?
Well, I think that's what a lot of the international law efforts were trying to do, particularly after World War II, is to raise the cost for these unilateral acts of violence just to achieve power. And it's clearly falling apart now. So
The
there you have
rules-based
it.
international order. Yeah. Yeah, there's now rulers are here and rules are here now.
So what I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
Eric, and Julia too, but you, Eric, you sort of talked about Ireland and its non-central power uh, MO. And so, I've read about how all the tech bros, or many of them, want to bring back feudalism.
yeah,
And I haven't actually bothered to read any of the original sources. But now you got me to wondering. So the classic East Coast response to that is, what idiots are they? But are some of them actually arguing or making the case for feudalism in the context of we need less central government, or not?
Or do they just expect that they will be the lords
Yeah,
and
or
they're
yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's yeah. I mean, I think they're all arguing for less central government until they need central government to
Mm-hmm.
coerce the population to do something, right? Like that's just how things work. Um, they, I don't think I don't think they're arguing for like a two-auth system. I think it's more like corporate feudalism, where the
Yeah.
corporations hold the power, they're the power centers, which is kind of how things are already, with some vestiges of
Yeah,
people saying the word democracy.
that's right.
Um, but also, a corporation is an act of government, right? A corporation can't even be born into existence unless you're shielding individuals from liability. So um, I I would say that they're very selective
Yeah.
about when they want the state to intervene. I wouldn't call it anarcho-feudalism in any real meaning. But there's people smarter than me out there who are advocating for this. I can't remember. Julia, what was the one guy who you had me look up who is just openly techno-feudalist?
Was he? Yes, he was an ex effective altruist as well,
Yeah,
maybe. There could be some crossover there. I can't remember his name, but I do think there could be some crossover between effective altruists and techno-feudalists.
yeah. I think it's an easy argument to make when you have all the power.
Yeah,
And I think that's
it should be
that's the
like
way it's being
this.
happened. Yeah. What I'd like to see is more like let them start a city state. Everything in between city states is free territory. Like no federal government owns 80% of Nevada or something like that. So then you actually have the opportunity to opt in. So like the free market dogma is that these are all voluntary relationships between employer and employee. And then the anarcho-syndicalists would come back and say, it's not really voluntary if you're going to starve if you don't take a job.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I go back and forth on that, but I definitely sympathize with that position. If homesteading is always an option, And if running your own little, commune out in the middle of nowhere that has water rights and stuff is always an option, then you can say no to any job offer, which gives you leverage and it takes you out of precarity and it actually makes the free market work because it actually makes the free market free. So that's what I'd like to see is city states with lots of territory in between. And then there's risks of being in that territory because the city
Sure.
state doesn't defend you, so you better
Right.
learn how to shoot if you're going to homestead. But that's at least a fair trade-off that you get to make instead of just being born in Singapore and you're not allowed to build a shack outside of Singapore.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. You bring up so many fascinating ideas. I have another question that came up as I was listening to you both. So, the human species, right? Is there greater variation in human aptitude and talent than there is in other species? In other words, why communities and anarchist ideas often, or actually where all ideas of how to organize ourselves falter, is that some people just aren't as capable as others. And we have a hard time saying, well, let them die. And I totally get why we have a hard time saying that. So
Yeah.
is that true for like bears? Uh, is it true for ants? I don't
For
think it's
pandas?
true for ants. I think ants have a narrow spectrum of aptitudes, and they've, you know, the two things have interacted so that their society accurately represents the full range of ant aptitudes, right? But we have humans who are obviously on a bell curve, inescapably. I don't know. I can tell you're thinking, both of you are. I don't know. It just entered my mind. It's one of our problems that we have such a big, long bell curve that if we had a better distribution, tighter distribution, we'd be happier. I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those random thoughts that entered
Okay.
my
I
mind.
love
So
that.
this leads to a poem, which is a poem that I pulled this morning when I was looking at my wonderful poetry book, which I will now go get. Eric, what's your response? I'm being
Oh,
saved by a
sure.
poem.
So that's something I'm really deeply interested in, and I think it's more questions than answers. And I think it's like population biology, where
Yes.
like like if you put a, if you put 1,000 worker ants, so ants actually do differentiate quite a bit by role.
Yes, they
Uh,
do.
but
Yes.
they're born, they could go in any direction, and then they get the royal jelly or something like that.
Yeah.
But I love questions like what if you had a state that was only males,
Yes.
and then you had babies born into that state that was only males, would the female birth rate go up? uh, in order to like, is it self-correcting? Is it self-leveling? Is there some sort of pheromonal influence? And like when we talk about conscious awareness, especially like if consciousness is an energy and can only be it can only change forms and never be created and destroyed, is there some sort of conservation of consciousness? So like when you look at how crowds work, is one of those people fully conscious and the other people just follow along? And is it possible even to have distributed consciousness? And is that why we see things like the Pareto principle, where
Mm-hmm.
the small number of people do all the producing and all the influencing? And like, I think those are great questions, and I don't know the answers to
Yeah. Yeah.
those for sure.
I think those are all great questions, and I also don't know the answers to. And it makes me think about, I love the question about the animals. And it makes me think of this article. I am going to read this poem, but it makes me think of this article about that I just sent you, Carmen, about aggressive, these female turtles that jump off a cliff when the male turtles are too sexually aggressive. So there's this subpopulation of turtles who something happened genetically and the male turtles have become so aggressive and probably because the 90% of the population is male. And the female
Mm-hmm.
turtles apparently would rather jump off. They've done an experiment. They had a little landing pad, so when she jumped off the cliff, that she was caught. But in nature, they would find them dead on the cliffs. They would be chased by aggressive males, and the females would rather just kill themselves and jump off the cliff than deal with that. And it's self-correcting, right? Because that's going to end the species. And there was a big mistake in the species. It's not going to go well. And so they're like, all right, see ya. This is the end of this. So um I'm not saying that, just to be totally clear, not saying that's a human solution, but that is if humans do get driven to those kind of decisions, like the whole group of people in Japan who say, I'm not going to have kids, and in China,
Yeah.
I mean, people are seeing that the world is messed up, and they're saying, we got to stop this, and that's very interesting. But then it also brings up this question of
Antinatalist, a term I
That's
ran
right.
into
antinatalist, right?
last week.
You
Yes.
should not have children, right? Which
Right.
I also think is not great. Because human beings also have this, and I'm not going to say we're the only species that has this because I don't know if this is true, but we have this, but I am going to say that we have these brains, and for whatever reason, we have the experience of deep internal meaning and this sort of spiritual, philosophical sense that drives us towards meaning. And perhaps one of the meanings of being a person is realizing that part of the deal that makes an organization or a community work is care for those who are less competent. And so
Yeah.
some people's skill set will be care for those who are less competent, even as adults. And other people's skill set will be to train people to be more competent to the extent that they can be. And I feel like that teaches compassion, and that compassion can actually help a city state, because I love the city state model. I'm very into this local model now because I think that's where we're going.
Me
But
too.
yeah, I think all three of us feel that way, and I think that compassion is the glue that's required, and that it's not mythologies of power over, it's compassion that is the glue. So anyway, here's the poem that it reminds me of, and I'm not even 100% sure why it reminds me of this poem, but it's called What Kind of God? And it's by Kabir, who lived in the 1440s, early 1500s. He's a mystic. What kind of God would he be if he did not hear the bangles ring on an ant's wrist as they move the earth in their sweet dance? And what kind of God would he be if a leaf's prayer was not as precious to creation as the prayer his own son sang from the glorious depth of his soul for us? And what kind of God would he be if the vote of millions in this world could sway him to change the divine law of love?
Hmm.
That speaks so clearly with compassion's elegant tongue, saying, eternally saying, all are forgiven. Moreover, dears, no one has ever been guilty. What kind of God would he be if he did not count the blinks of your eyes and is in absolute awe of their movements? What a God we have. So
Yeah,
if
I don't know why that's connecting either, but I'm glad you read it. And
it
I really,
feels,
yeah, I really like that line that all are forgiven, and furthermore, nobody was guilty in the first place.
yeah,
I think that's, I think the concept that humans have guilt, like indirect guilt, is such a horrible concept in human society.
at the same time, we're just coming off the whole Epstein files things, and I was just livid as I was reading through those files, and I was mad at people in my field who had interacted with him, and I I sort of hoped they felt guilty because I was angry and etc. And yet the guilt itself doesn't do any good.
I mean, we all have things that we feel guilty about, but the idea that we are all inherently guilty
Mhm.
Yeah.
just because we're human, I don't like.
I really actually like shame as a deterrent mechanism. I think it's the only way that reputation-based, like non-surveillance, uh, no big gods. I think it can only work through shame as one of the mechanisms. But I totally agree. Like guilt as an underlying original sin or something like that's
Exactly.
no way to navigate the world.
Yeah.
No, but also, by the way, I want to make clear because I know you, Eric. I know that you don't mean shame as in people like some authorities shaming someone else. You mean the existence of shame within a person so that I contemplate doing something and then I go, no, that's not gonna.
Well, And
I
normative
assume.
social pressure. So
Yeah.
like, what will the community think if I steal, 3 times as much grain as I should be taking? Like, that's how I'm
Yeah, but
thinking.
that's not, yes, but that's still not what will the leader, how will the leader shape?
That's
So,
right. Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that's where when Carmen talks about scale and like what is that, how can you scale? You've got what Dunbar's number of something like 150
15, right? Yeah.
people who you can directly deeply empathize with as part of your group. Are there ways to extend that? And I think one of the ways they've tried to extend it is by chopping people up into a million different abstract categories and say that uh, diversity is our strength and we need to really get to know one another's differences. But I think from a cognitive load perspective, that's running in the opposite direction. I think what we
Exactly.
should be
That's
doing is superordinate categories. So like at least, after September 11th, I saw all these commercials like different people of different ethnicities. I'm an American. And it's like also like I, good job, but also it's kind of like scary when I see that. Um,
And it's
but like
scary because,
human, human at the human
yeah,
level, that's the
yeah,
superordinate category, or
yeah.
even like be a being on this earth is a superordinate category. So I think that's the only way that it works, is go
It's
by going
going in the
superordinate.
right direction, but it's not quite there yet. But I think people, I do think that has to be a baby step thing because people were so far in the other direction. Like you and I are so different because you're white and I'm black or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's baby steps, but I get it.
Maybe it can't work like the Baha'i religion. I got to know them when I was in Evanston,
Yeah.
Illinois. We got quite close to some of the leaders in the church there, and I really loved it. But also, their attendance is pretty low, and like it makes me wonder if you can get the sort of feeling, the epic meaning that you get from being part of an in-group, if there is no out-group to compare to. Like, I think that's an open
yeah,
question too.
yeah, that is. Well, we
Yes.
just hit 3 o'clock and it went really, really fast,
Oh my goodness.
which makes
Yeah.
this a classic panda.
Hmm. Thank you, Eric. You helped us make a classic panda.
It is.
That's
It's a
awesome.
classic panda episode.
I'm so happy to talk to both of you anytime you want to talk. Like,
Yeah.
of course, it's like, anarchist meeting in the woods is already one thing. And then Julia's perspective on it, like, pivots it in a way that, you don't think
Right.
about. So it's really
Yeah.
wonderful.
No, it's really, really good. I enjoy very much. Um, uh, I have a feeling which I cannot articulate into words, but
Yes.
I enjoy that feeling very much.
I want to call it an umami flavor feeling.
You're right. It is like an
That's
umami.
very nice.
It's an umami. It's a philosophical
Yes.
umami.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
that's right.
Very savory.
Very
It
savory.
is very savory. That's
It
good.
is.
Yeah. Wonderful. I agree.
Yeah. Very fun.
Awesome.
Thank you, Eric. We'll see you again sometime.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was
Thank you
great to
both.
talk to you.